This video is sponsored by FlexiSpot. Modern gaming has had some highs from the likes of Elden Ring, Baulders Gate 3, and for me, Jedi Survivor, but also had some lows with the likes of Forspoken, Halo Infinite, and Gollum. Over the last decade, we've seen some giants in the industry battle it out until only one was left with any dignity. Xbox's last resort is Game Pass, which has led to them buying out as many companies as possible, such as Bethesda and Activision. They want to give themselves as much of a fighting chance as possible for the future, and with that, they're going to be looking down the barrel at possibly buying out companies like Nintendo and Steam. However, even with the issues around Xbox and the gaming space in general right now, with the bad releases, overhyping products, $70 price tags, and making tens of thousands of people redundant, we have some form of light over the next few years. So today I wanted to take you on a journey, one that talks about the amazing state that is the current future of gaming releases, and hopefully what we'll see is one of the best years in gaming with 2025. So grab a cup of tea, join me in discussing how 2025 might be the best year for gaming. Just before we do that, if you do enjoy content about games and gaming topics, then make sure to subscribe to the channel. If you want to support the channel directly and get access to older streams, then make sure to check out the join button. It's 99p a month, but if you do want access to all the videos early, then make sure to check out the Patreon and the Exiled ones tier over there. With that, you'll be getting access to all of these videos early, or as early as I can possibly give them to you. And on top of that, you'll get some extra other goodies, such as a special role in the Discord and a few other bits and pieces. If you do want to join a community of people who just love games and like talking about them, then make sure to come join the Discord. We do host a monthly game club. This month it was voted in for Elden Ring, so make sure to come on by if you're interested in joining in on that. Make sure just to @ me though, so that I can give you the role that is needed. But with that all being said, let's now talk about how next year could be one of the best years for gaming. I wanted to make this video as I've found over the last few years, most of the conversation around gaming as a whole has been incredibly negative. I've spoken about some of the negatives in the past, and I'm going to briefly go over the ones that I have at the front and center of my mind in a moment, as I don't want this video to come across as rose-tinted glasses. I wanted this video to be more of a reminder that you can get excited about gaming as a whole, and what we could be getting without the negative side of hype taking over. We've also seen Xbox getting ripped through the dirt over the years for a multitude of issues, many being related to the employment and what they've been doing with their studios, all the way through to possible monopolization. There is genuine reasons to have issues with Xbox, however I am going to play a little bit of devil's advocate and give you a bit of whataboutism, as I do believe a lot of the criticism that gets levied towards Microsoft can also be heavily put towards Sony as well. They're just a bit more sneaky about it. A very simple example that is very recent is Xbox making a digital only version of their console and people getting upset about this online, but then, just don't acknowledge the fact that the PS5 that has been out, for what, 4 years now, has a digital version and has done since its launch. That is just one of many examples that can be mapped onto other companies or just Sony directly, but people just act like Microsoft are the big bad guy of the gaming industry. However, they do deserve some credit from time to time, and today I'm going to be talking about what they've announced recently within their showcase. First though, I do want to talk about some of those issues within the current gaming space. I'll make sure to do it quick though, as I've already talked about this in plenty of videos. My issues with gaming are that the £70 price tag is in my opinion an outrageous price, which I've made an entire deep dive into the pricing structure and how in my opinion it's a number that just isn't justified. We have games that are getting released unfinished or borderline like scam products. Some of the most notorious examples of that in the past was Assassin's Creed Unity, Cyberpunk 2077, and No Man's Sky. We have the current creator space in gaming, which is massively negative, and all you need to do is have a few video essayists make a video about the same sort of game in the same sort of vein, and you're going to have a public opinion set that could even ruin a game's reputation for the long term. Maybe not entirely, but they're able to influence enough people that it kind of spreads the message over and over again that either other publications are going to say similar things, tweets, or other people are going to create videos based on their opinion that their opinion is really just created from someone else's negative view of it. We have some issues around games feeling and almost entirely being the same on each release, and the lack of anything new being made. However, this seems to be changing to an extent, and Xbox is seemingly trying to tackle that exact issue. Those are the basic four that I'm going to give you a brief explanation information about, and there is one more that I want to talk about which can be mapped onto anything, not just games themselves. And this is that over the last few months I've been thinking more and more on this idea of how everything has become more digitized. And it's not really like an idea that obviously I've come up with. I've seen videos of people talking about this outside of the gaming space, and it's made me a little bit more hesitant about the idea of everything going digital and the factor that we just don't have anything anymore that's on a disc or just physical or tangible in any way. I've found myself coming to this weird idea of wanting to do things in a way that kind of relates back to when I was younger, in the sense of having more things that are tangible and have some form of tactile feeling than are nothing more than nothingness and numbers on a screen. Game Pass is an example of the bad side of this, with an extreme positive currently, but in the future, if for example digital only stuff is the future, then you could end up in a possibility where they could just pull the plug on many games ever going on Game Pass, because they could make games specifically for Game Pass like they've already done and then rip them from Game Pass and whatnot. I want to start by having more physical discs again, having more things like it, whether or not that's DVDs, Blu-ray discs and whatnot, just because that's kind of what I always used to do when I was younger. I grew up in a place where there was hardly any good internet connection. I literally had 1 megabyte per second download speed for like 10 years of my life. I know, at least I had connection to the internet, but like literally it took me 8 days to download GTA 5 on my PC, and I had to reinstall it multiple times. So yeah, that is a part of life that isn't particularly fun to think about. But when it comes to it though, I want to have more things that are physical, actually mean that you have something actually there that is a bit more than just, you know, the existence of, hey, you're basically playing this experience that at some point in the future they could either disable the servers or even just pull your access to the game entirely. Now that that is all out of the way, I want to talk about the actual hopefulness that I have towards the future of gaming right now, and I'll be discussing with you some amazing games, or at least some that look very interesting to me, and I'm actually, if I could say it, borderline hyped for, but not hyped in the way of like blindness. I am just very much intrigued. So make sure to grab a second cup of tea and join me in deep diving about the future of gaming as a whole. The first place that I want to start with is actually in the past, not the games that are coming out in the future, but the ones that we've already had. I made this statement that 2023 might have been one of the best years in a long time for games. The reason that I'm saying 2025 could be one of the best years in gaming is that there is a high chance that it could be one of the best years in this decade, and it means that it does have to compete with what is currently the best year for games for us with 2023. Which is going to be really hard to justify. However, I'm going to make an attempt to do so in this video and just explain some things about what could be going on in the future when it comes to a load of these game releases, as we are comparing it to a lot of heavy hitters that came out during that year. As in 2023, the likes of Tears of the Kingdom, Spider-Man 2, Resident Evil 4's remake, Baulders Gate 3, Dead Space, Sea of Stars, Jedi Survivor, Hogwarts Legacy, Lies of P, and even games like Starfield, Diablo 4, and Horizon Call of the Mountain are all great games, even if some of them have their shortcomings or were overshadowed by other releases. That lineup alone is one of the best we've seen in a very, very long time. But the potential that we have going forward could be insane. There is one massive gap in that whole lineup though of games. We might have had an amazing year for those who love single player titles, but there wasn't much when it came to the online space. We haven't had a good multiplayer title in a long time. So let's talk about the big news, which was what everyone seems to be looking forward to, or at least there actually isn't overwhelmingly negative thoughts about, with Black Ops 6. I recently saw an Instagram reel that, if true, could be incredible. It showed how we had a good time in life during 2012 to 13 with Black Ops 2 coming out and then GTA 5, and how we could be getting something similar nowadays with 2024 and 2025 with Black Ops 6 and GTA 6. Honestly, if we get anything close to that sort of experience, then it will solidify for me my feelings about this next year in gaming. I wanted to start with Black Ops 6 because it's the first COD since Modern Warfare 1 in 2019 that people seem to be somewhat excited about, and for good reason. This game has a lot of hype building around it, which is a word that people don't like to hear nowadays in the gaming space, but it is doing well in terms of its marketing. We've seen gameplay and understand that the story is going to be taking place in an interesting time in modern history, with a new movement system and, by the looks of it, a possible new zombies mode that actually has time dedicated to it. Yes, all of this is speculation, but that doesn't mean we can't look at everything that has been laid out in front of us and just, accept that none of it could be lining signing up for a decent game. We have a COD game that has been in one of the longest development cycles, if not the longest development cycle of the entire franchise. We have a game that looks like it's trying to do its best at making the best possible game they can if you watch any of the behind the scenes footage about it. Yes, we don't know how true any of this will actually be until it releases, but Treyarch typically has a very good history with it. Yes, the previous release they made wasn't particularly loved, but I'm going to give you a hot take here, which is that Black Ops 4 wasn't actually that bad of a game, and I know you guys can fight about that in the comments because some people dislike the game heavily, thought it was actually a good multiplayer, and I loved Blackout. And also the zombies, especially like the beginning map, wasn't that bad. I didn't mind it overall. But I would say its strongest suit was its multiplayer and Blackout. And the other great thing for people who have Game Pass is that even if you don't want to pay that full price for a new Call of Duty release, you can just pay, £12 and get access to the whole thing and try it out for a month and see if you actually like it. Another game that I am interested to see more of is going to be Fable, the return to the franchise that everyone thought was dead, which I thought was the case. I'm really happy to see that they're actually giving this franchise another shot, and anything that adds to the types of games that I love, which is medieval fantasy sort of games, and I'm definitely going to be interested in checking it out. It's going to be more similar to its roots in the way it's going to be functioning. Everything from the Xbox event seems to be like they're trying to go back to some form of roots of what made Xbox titles Xbox. I remember playing Fable 1 and 2 and loving both of them when I was younger, and eventually playing 3 because it was available with Games with Gold. This honestly, for me, looks like an old school Fable game from what we've seen so far, and it's pretty cool. And also the guy from Peep Show who plays Super Hands, Matt King, is also in this trailer, which is going to be pretty funny to imagine this guy,
it's not Blue Peter, having a nice little relaxing smoke of crack,
talking to us in-game. I know that there's some controversy around the character's design, but again, for the same reason that I don't really care too much about the AC Shadows controversy, is that realistically, I don't really have a massive opinion about it until I've played the game. We also saw that a new Doom is coming out. Personally, I'm not someone who's a massive fan of the Doom franchise, however, I've always seen its appeal. It's a franchise that I have access to playing. I've got one of the games on Steam, and also obviously I can just get Game Pass and play it on there. I'm again someone who loves story and that sort of thing, so when a game is so heavily focused around its gameplay elements, I struggle to kind of care too much about it. However, I can definitely see the reason why people love these games, and why people love both of the last two releases especially. Purely due to some of the previous games mentioned, I am actually really interested to checking out this entire franchise, especially now because I don't know how much of it is that I don't want to check them out because, when I was younger I didn't care as much, or because, maybe I'm a bit more interested now that I'm a bit older. This brings me to Dragon Age Vilgard, which is another cool looking fantasy game. I genuinely think this Xbox event might have been one of the most diverse choices in gaming genres that we've seen in a long time. And what I'm also loving is how many of these games have their own form of art style, meaning the focus can be driven away from making a game as graphically, realistic as possible, and focusing on it being as good as possible gameplay wise and story wise, instead of, vice versa. It's been a long time since I was involved in any way within the Dragon Age franchise, with the last one that I checked out being Dragon Age 2, but I am here for the hopefulness that could be the future of gaming actually involving the likes of Dragon Age, finding its better footing since its last load of releases, and hopefully actually getting itself back out there into the gaming consciousness. The next game that caught my attention during the Xbox showcase was something that I'd never heard of beforehand, called Expedition 33. This might have been one of the coolest looking games that I've seen that's going to be coming out. It's a turn-based game, and I'll wait and see whether or not I like it, because I'm not someone who typically likes turn-based games outside of the likes of Civilization, for example. It definitely looks good, and the world itself looks really impressive with what they're trying to make out of it. And what this game is also a sign of is more unknown IP or just brand new IP entering into mass market, which is honestly really exciting to see. And it's opening up the scope of what is typically the conventional sort of game coming out that these companies are willing to host on their platforms, which honestly I'm happy for. Before I talk about many games like it, I want to talk about one game in particular, one that is a remake, and I couldn't be happier to see it, which is Metal Gear 3's remake, a remake of Snake Eater. I grew up watching my siblings play this game, and I never played it for myself. I would love to, but it was always on the back burner, but now that a new refresh is coming out, I do believe it might be time to finally give this game a proper shot. And from the small amount that we've actually seen about this game, gameplay wise and looks, this looks like the bare minimum standard of what a remade game should look like. And honestly, I'm all here for games that are being remade, especially if they are older titles, and I'm not actually against remaking games, I'm heavily against remastering. remastered games. As remasters are in a different category of their own, they aren't particularly interesting for most people, and when you have a remake, it opens up the floodgates for new players to come along and actually become fans of these franchises that they may not have ever checked out beforehand because of things like graphical fidelity. It'll create more Metal Gear fans who are willing to then go back and play some of the older games that come across as a bit more clunkier and at times harder to play just because of them being older titles. But now we need to see a Sons of Liberty remake, so yeah, make sure to do that, Konami. Please make this and remake it. Just do it, it will sell ridiculously well. We then have a flurry of new games that are coming out over the next year or so, hopefully anyway, with the first one that I want to discuss being Flintlock. This is one of two of the Souls-like games that was shown off within this showcase that are coming out over the next couple of years that I'm honestly really happy to see and experience for myself. Giving us something that isn't made to be a big open world masterpiece and becoming more centered in the idea of just gameplay solely is definitely something that I'm open to. I've never been a big Souls player, but I've become more and more interested in checking out the older titles, properly playing through Elden Ring, but also checking out the other Souls experiences from Software, but also other Souls-like games like Lies of P that I'm actually interested to play in the future, and also I enjoyed Jedi Survivor, which I know people argue the case of, but it has a Souls-like combat system, especially if you put it on the max difficulty, which I didn't, but yeah, it is definitely something that when you up that difficulty, you're going to get a very similar feel to Souls. The next game that I thought gave a kind of cozy vibe and reminded me of Don't Starve was Winter Burrow. It's something new and looks like it's going to be trying to do a lot of the same things that many small survival-esque games are meant to do. It's a fun little twist on the genre with the general idea of the game. It could do something pretty similar to something like a Minecraft or Don't Starve in its ability to cross over into a far more approachable manner for people to, get involved into survival games. Then we saw Mixtape get shown off, which was really interesting to me as a game generally. Not so much the overall sense of gameplay or anything like that, as we didn't really get to see too much of it, but what I actually find interesting about it in particular is the actual idea of what the game is and what the plot is of the game. I don't know if it's something to do with the idea of what games would have been like back in, before the internet was the way that we know it is now, or because it's to see the interpretation of what is stereotypically meant to be like upbringing. But yeah, I think it looks like a really cool little basis to have as a game. Another survival game was announced with Atomfall, which is taking on the nuclear disaster side of gaming, and looks like it's giving us some supernatural elements set in England, which is pretty cool to see. When I saw the trailer, I did want to check it out just because, I'm English, it's set in Britain, and it makes sense for me to want to check it out. But overall, I thought the actual showcase of the game was pretty interesting from what we saw. To take a break from the new games from either small or non-existent franchises, let's talk about Indiana Jones, which again, like Hogwarts Legacy, is a game that wasn't really interesting to me when it comes to its general thing, as I've never been interested in either franchise. I've never understood the fascination with this franchise in particular. I was forced to watch one of the movies when I was in media studies, which probably didn't help when it came to the point of me not really being interested in Indiana Jones stuff. But I do think as the overall premise of what the franchise is and what they try to do with the movies, it would actually be really fitting with this medium and the way that they can storytell it within a game. Some will definitely complain and have no hopes for it because it's being published by Bethesda, and I'm not mixing up BSG and Bethesda specifically for any other reason than, because also Todd Howard is an executive producer on the game, which, some people won't be particularly happy with. And to me though, the game looks like it's taking that fun blend of everything that we've ever seen with the franchise and trying to do it in a way that fits into a game, and if I'm honest, it looks like it's going to be pretty fun for anyone who loves that sort of thing. It's the sort of thing that makes sense as a game and could be another entryway for people who are like me, for example, who are not interested in the films or anything like that, to just get involved in the franchise. Avowed is the next game that I wanted to talk about, as at first I thought it was going to be related to Elder Scrolls Online or New World or something, but in fact it's a new game made by Obsidian. The guys who are behind that literal cult fan base that is Fallout New Vegas. I just hope that this game doesn't create the same sort of elitist gamers that game did. Now, with that little bit of shade thrown towards the toxic side of the New Vegas fan base, I wanted to talk about how I actually love the fact that we're getting so many new IPs, and I'm honestly really happy with the fact that it's all kind of, well, not all, but many of them are within this RPG fantasy experience more recently anyway. As in the early 2000s, a good amount of the games that were coming out were, fantasy RPG titles. We saw some within the 2010s that were absolutely amazing, with the likes of Skyrim, The Witcher 3 and whatnot, but during the 2010s and entering into even early 2023, it felt like we were getting a load of sci-fi related games. And honestly, for sci-fi lovers out there, that's amazing, but I'm here for fantasy as that is the thing that I love the most. This title will have us go to a new land as an envoy as we deal with everything that is alive and dead at the same time. We have the options of swords, spells, guns, and more. I'm assuming anyway, we'll have more options than just using spells, swords, shields, and guns, but who knows, hopefully it's a little bit more, open-ended for us. Another thing that I noticed as well with a lot of the showcase about these games is that for some reason, so many of these games are first person only. Like, I found this really interesting. I don't know if it's just me who actually likes third person fantasy games. Maybe it is just me. I'm the same person who like wandering around in Skyrim in third person, and I do love the cinematic look that you get to a game with the likes of RDR2 and The Witcher 3 in third person. But yeah, I don't know whether or not it's just me. But yeah, I just noticed that. It's just really odd that almost every single game that they were talking about that was like a new title, that was like a RPG sort of thing, was all first person. And then another Souls-like game that appeared in the showcase was Wu Chang Fallen Feather. And again, this game looks really nice and all round. I think the visual art style of the game looks really great, and it reminds me a lot of Sekiro in terms of its overall vibe that it's giving off. It's also made by an indie team, which is really interesting because you get to see the actual scale that indie can go up to if it's given, a little bit of money. I'm guessing they were given a decent amount of money for this game, but I couldn't find any information about the studio at all. Like, there's basically next to nothing out there. And this is one of the reasons why I've built up some form of fence towards the idea of indie games, is because as much as, I love the idea of the amount of love that's put in by these studios or like, small dev teams and whatnot to make these games, one thing that I would say is that, even though AAA games do have too many cooks in the kitchen, or AA at times, I would say that there's a level of grandiose and scale that can be achieved in those games that are AAA or AA that just add this special sense of just visual art style or this overall feeling that a game can give off, and it makes it feel more premium, I guess is the better way of saying it. Which, sure, I know that some of you guys who are like indie lovers out there or literally hate anything that's not indie will dislike me saying, but it's just this idea of how, when you play a game that is a AAA or AA, that it just has that feeling that it gives off. Whereas a lot of indie games, I guess is the best way of saying it, a lot of indie games that you'll see like people play, they just have this same sort of vibe to them that is kind of more like a bare bones structure. But again, there is some, like this game, that are going to be outliers in that sort of regard. Now, a game that I've seen a lot of conversation about online, and I'm going to be hesitant until the game actually releases, is Assassin's Creed Shadows. I've already seen the AC fanboys do what they are going to do, and what I would have done a few years ago, back when I was one of them, which is instantly getting hyped and dropping your guardrails of everything Ubisoft the moment you see anything related to Assassin's Creed, which I understand. I used to be there. Please be hesitant until the game actually comes out. However, with my slight bit of negativity out of the way, I wanted to talk about 3 parts of the game that I thought was interesting that we saw within the gameplay trailer. The first one is that I'm really impressed with the way that the open world looks. I know it's not Ubisoft's weak point or anything like that, but it's something that I still want to give some form of praise to. The look and feel of the villages that Yasuke is walking through, I believe, actually looks really great, and is actually going to help us get immersed in massively just by the look of this one village that we've seen. Hopefully, though, that expands outwards to the greater world, and they haven't just, given us one small part of the game to roam around before seeing, what the actual game is like. Not as if they did that with Valhalla or anything. The second thing that I want to talk about is going to be the combat and stealth. I lump both of these in together because normally it's really hard for Ubi to even do both of them well in a balanced way. Typically they normally go over the top with one side or the other. The combat within this game does look really nice, if I'm being honest, and the change to the combat being more brutal is definitely a warm welcome. However, I have to say that based off what we saw within the trailer, it does look a tad easy. So it might be worth putting the difficulty up when you do buy the game, possibly. Again though, this is based off of like one little bit of footage, so I can't 100% say for sure. I know that we can see that there are some form of skills there in terms of its combat system like the previous RPG games, but I am hoping for a more grounded experience and not entering into overly fantastical elements like we've seen within prior releases. The stealth does look really good as well, with lighting actually playing a proper role. Being able to affect that and kill people through things like paper walls is really cool. Honestly, everything about the stealth looks really good. We even have the ability to go prone now, which is really nice. However, you can still see remains of the parkour from Valhalla and Odyssey within the actual, jumping around that we actually see within the trailer. However, I'm hoping that they can nail the other aspects, so that won't bother me as much. The last bit that I wanted to talk about is Naue and how her character just feels feels a bit odd. I mentioned this within my second channel video, so if you are interested to see my thoughts all round of the gameplay that we've seen, check out the second channel, Chatting with Exiled. But what I found really odd, and I don't know if it's just the way that the setup of the camera is, but both Yasuke and Nae, having both been in there, it just seems like she naturally takes up far less of the screen. So he just is, you know, towering, and he takes up way more of it when you're seeing it. And when you see her, she's just so much smaller, and I feel like it just looks out of place. I guess that's the best way of putting it. She just looks a bit out of place. It reminds me of those terrible looking mobile games that get advertised to you on Instagram. They're just trying too hard to look like Ghost of Tsushima or Assassin's Creed in Japan. And, you know, for good reason. People are hyped for that idea prior to this game coming out. However, I do feel like it just looks a bit odd. I don't know how else to put it then. She just looks out of place. The game looks like it's on the side of attempting to please everyone, which it has a chance of doing and being able to get that payoff of doing so. However, I can't 100% say for sure if that is the best bet. Based on what we saw as well, you'll be able to change character throughout the game. We already kind of knew this, so you could basically be like one character as you wish throughout missions, or within the free roam you can just swap between it. I'm guessing that they're going to do something similar to, let's say, a GTA 5 and switching between characters that way in the open world. However, as I mentioned in my second channel video, I do believe that this wasn't necessarily the best option. I believe they should have just done this out the gate where they make you choose. It's either a, you know, you can play as Yasuke, the tank samurai who's going to be heavily combat focused, or play as Nae, the stealth focused assassin who can fully utilize the entire toolkit of the Creed. I feel like this would have been a better way because it would have added more replay value to the game itself outside of just people wanting to experience the game, I guess, in a slightly different way by, you know, doing some missions by different characters and then having the other character act as a best friend-esque thing instead. I guess I can see why they did it. It probably helps when it comes to budgeting, for example, because they would have had to have made literally like two separate kind of games, or at least two separate types of cutscenes and whatnot for every single time for whichever character you're playing as. But again, I do feel like it would have just been better if they just had that choice out the gate instead of giving it to you for missions, because I feel like everyone's just going to choose Nae for like most of the assassination missions and then just roam around as Yasuke because, you know, why would you roam around as the assassin when you could just brutally take down everyone in the open world? Stalker 2 is also a game that looks really interesting to me when we were seeing it. I've never played the original, but I can't lie, this game does look like a great title. It appears to be blending together that feeling of Escape from Tarkov / COD and mixing it in with the wasteland feel that you get within the likes of Fallout. It does look really good, and I guarantee you it's the sort of game that if any kids play it when it does come out, they're going to have nightmares from it. And then the last game within the showcase that I thought was the most interesting to see was Gears of War E-Day. This again is them trying to lay out the groundwork for what is the Xbox identity. I loved playing games like Gears of War Judgment when I was younger, but this game is also going to be released on Steam, which I guess is cool for the overall customer base that's going to be playing the game generally. It gives you even less of a reason to stick to Xbox. Again, this is the whole Xbox thing, taking, you know, exclusive games away from Xbox, you know, seems a bit odd, but hey ho. The game doesn't have too much information around it, but it's going to be focused around the origin story of the world of Gears of War as a whole that we know it has from the previous titles. Hopefully we'll see a little bit more when it comes to this game in the future, and I'm hoping it'll honestly bring a little bit of public favor back towards Xbox in some way, because as much as, you know, people can say that they love the idea of like Sony being like amazing and Xbox being the beating, like punching bag of everything gaming wise, I would like to see both actual companies be competitive to each other instead of it just seeming like one is overly dominating over the other. Those are the games though from the showcase that I thought looked cool and honestly are making 2024 and 2025 by themselves look like great years. However, there is 4 other titles that I want to discuss the future of gaming as a whole, which then brings me to GTA 6. If we end up getting the next GTA game alongside all of those games, I think this game will single-handedly be able to make it look like one of the best years within this decade. Just because it's GTA. Let's be honest, that's the reason why everyone is excited to see this game. And while I was trying to script this segment of the video, I couldn't honestly come to anything or comprehend anything of what exactly I would want to see within the next GTA game. I've stayed away from everything related to this game outside of the trailers and avoided all of the rumors. So I don't really know what I can think of when it comes to I need this within the next title, as after GTA 4, RDR1, GTA 5 and RDR2, I have full faith in Rockstar to just give us an amazing game. I honestly just can't wait to see what that will be as a sequel for RDR RDR3. However, if they're able to just make a game that is everything that made RDR2 amazing and GTA 5 amazing, and then just add them all together, give us a little bit more on top, I'll be happy. This game is the one that everyone wants to see. Mix this on top of the factor that we could be getting a great Call of Duty, plus a load of smaller titles that people are interested to see, or even possibly old franchises coming back from the dead that we might be able to see, and it could make this next couple of years a treat to play. Star Wars Outlaws is also another interesting one. This game has a lot of controversy around it, like almost every single game coming out nowadays, but especially for any Ubisoft title. Personally, I am interested to see what they're going to be doing with the first big open world title for Star Wars. Jedi Survivor was open world, yes, but it kind of in the sense for like it was open world missions. You could explore the places that you were going to as for like mission segments, but you couldn't exactly go to another random planet in the Star Wars universe and wander around it and do side missions. You couldn't just go to, you know, a random other part of the planet that wasn't already mapped out for you because of where you were located on that planet for a mission. So having a possible decent Star Wars entry will also make it a great year for us. Alongside the fact that this is the first Star Wars game that is being made by a company that isn't EA in pretty much a decade and a half at this point, it's going to be a super interesting thing to see what we end up getting. The next one that forced me to rethink the games that I am willing to pre-order, as I completely forgot about it as a possibility, and one that I ended up having to add on to that very list, and something that if you are in the Discord you'll see me playing quite a lot, is the fact that I love the Civilization games. More particularly Civ 5 and Civ 6, but with the Gathering Storms DLC. I've put loads of hours into both of these games and absolutely love both of them. So when I found out that Civ 7 was in the works and will be out next year, I was pretty hyped. This game is going to be one that I will be dedicating days of my life to, like I have for the other ones as well. My view on what I want Civ 7 to be is pretty much to incorporate everything that is within Civ 6 with the Gathering Storms DLC and have that as the standard gameplay mechanics and then just add to this. I'd like to see more of a focus around armies feeling like armies, as they kind of just feel like two smaller units than anything. I'd like them to kind of feel more grandiose, or at least like have the units a bit smaller and have more men, so it actually looks like you've got more soldiers there. I'd also love to see more of an interesting way on naval combat and barbarians. With naval combat, for example, I feel like they could go about it in a sneaky way where, you know, back in the days before communication was easily available and ships were kind of just going off into sea hoping they make it to the destination that they're going to, if someone attacked that ship from a different, you know, country, who's gonna know? Nobody would have. And I think it would be interesting to see them do something like that where, let's say in a turn, your ship takes damage and you can maybe see the ship off in the distance outside of, you know, your HUD of where you can see. Maybe it's the case that they just take down your ship entirely, and because you weren't, you know, able to send that information back, it just happens in the next turn and your ship is now sunk, and it's like, oh cool, someone has just sunk my ship, basically, sort of thing. The other one that I would like to see is barbarians having more things like villages and possibly cities. We kind of got this within a DLC of Civ 6, but I would like it in a way that isn't just like hellish to play. With the way that Civ 6 does it, it's just a bit odd. I feel like it just becomes a bit like overpowered, or at least it does for me, because I play a lot of Civ 6 on like the harder difficulties, so it just means that everything it just becomes more difficult, let alone the fact that I can deal with musketmen whilst I've still got stuff like spearmen is just insane. Another game that is coming out is going to be Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, which is something that I was interested to play. I did start it on stream with you guys, and I was struggling a lot to just get into it, and I can easily see why people do love it. However, for me, I'd love to get into this franchise but not have to deal with its combat system, especially considering I have a felt mouse mat and it completely screws with my mouse. So until I swap out the mouse mat, I'm definitely not touching that game. Outside of those games, this is where I say that this decade could genuinely be something insane for gaming. We could be having all of that, plus an eventual RDR3, maybe. I honestly doubt that it will come out in the next 5 or 6 years, but there is a possibility of it, who knows. But then also Elder Scrolls 6. Ideally, we will get it within the next 5 or so years. Again, I have my doubts towards the idea of it. I think there's more of a chance of me being like nearing 30 than there is the chance, you know, of the game coming out whilst I'm 22. I genuinely believe this next year in gaming could be one that makes this decade just next level and well-rounded for everyone who wants to play games across any form of genre, and it honestly seems like they're trying, or at least this showcase from Xbox in particular really comes across like they are trying to deal with the fact that a lot of people do feel disheartened from the massive powerhouses of this industry. The fact that games just feel like they're shallow shells of what they could have been, or that they are just nothing more than monetary hell. Everything about it is just something that I feel like they were trying to at least deal with some of those issues. To end off the video, I did want to say that we do have a load of issues in gaming, but I am becoming more and more hopeful for the future of what we're getting when it comes to these gaming releases. I genuinely am looking forward to the future of games and can't wait to see more of what we get in the future. All of these games mentioned in today's video are all ones that I'm excited to see, or I'm just wanting to check out and see how they do in the future. So let me know what games you're interested in from the showcase or whatever in particular, and let me know what you want to see in the future. Now though, with that all being said, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and if you did, make sure to leave a like and do subscribe for more content. And now, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, it was sponsored by FlexiSpot, so I may now start talking to you about the amazing chair that they sent out to me very recently. Today's video is sponsored by FlexiSpot, who sent me out the C7B Air chair, which if I'm honest, really surprised me. Firstly, my posture while seating is so much better. At first I thought it was a little bit of a gimmick, however after giving it a go and using it way more, having my back held up properly and straight actually means that my body feels way more natural in this position, instead of me being hunched over all the time like I would be typically when in my old chair. This is because this chair has the ability to change its height way further than any of my previous models that I've ever tried, and the vertical adaptive lumbar support, which has really helped me so far when it comes to feeling more natural and in place when I'm sat down. When I was first using this, I did find it a little bit strange, however after a lot of usage I found it way better than my previous chair, because typically I would find myself having to do so many different micro adjustments when I was sat down to get comfortable, or just sit in a manner that wasn't making my legs go dead or anything like that, whereas this chair I can sit comfortably in it for long periods of time without feeling as if I need to change position. Mix this with the fact that my back is being supported fully by this cushion, and the armrests have way more versatility than my previous model, has allowed me to improve my typing experience and overall posture. Now this is because I have an issue within my right forearm, and it allows me to at least have a little bit more of a change when I'm sat down and typing, because I'll have to change positions every like 5 to 10 minutes so I can actually type for long periods of time without my hand cramping. The last difference though for me that was really important when getting a new chair, and I was really lucky that they decided to reach out and sponsor today's video, is the fact that I really wanted something that was breathable, and this has great breathability. My previous chair was one of those big clunky gaming chairs. I'd had it before previously, so I just decided to go for the same one again when it broke previously, and yeah, sitting in one of those that's leather as well for over an hour at minimum, you're going to start sweating in it, and it's not particularly great, whereas this one so far I've had no issues. I can sit in it with a hoodie, have zero issues, and literally feel perfectly content. So make sure to pick up one of these chairs down below in the description, and there's also a code down there for 5% off, so make sure to take use of that if you can. And also the link down below is an affiliate link, so it does support the channel if you do purchase through that, which would be much appreciated. However, don't feel as if you have to. Anyway, with that all being said, thank you FlexiSpot for sponsoring today's video and sending me out this chair, and I hope that we do more work together in the future.